Okay, we'll start with this. Well, it appears that Top Rank Boxing has won the purse bid over Matchroom for the mandated fight between Alex Saucedo and WBO 140-pound champion Maurice Hooker. The fight's going to be staged in Alex Saucedo's backyard of Oklahoma City. And this is going to be Maurice Hooker's first title defense of that newly obtained WBO title. The title that he won, the vacant title that he won in the fight with Terry Flanagan. And this makes for an interesting fight because these are two long-rangy 140-pound fighters. Both of these guys are hovering around 5'10", 5'11", really long, slinky guys for a weight class like 140. The thing is that neither one of them really uses that height to the best of their advantage. You know, sometimes Maurice gives it up to smaller fighters, and sometimes Alex Saucedo gives it up to smaller fighters. This was very evident in Alex Saucedo's last fight with Lenny Z, a fight where he found himself in trouble, a fight where he found himself at the business end of some big right hands that busted open his face. Alex Saucedo managed to survive the onslaught. He weathered some really big punches that you could see had him on Queer Street. He weathered the onslaught. He managed to get a 7th round TKO stoppage over Lenny Z, but you could see his defensive limitations. You could see that that is an area of weakness for Alex Saucedo. I'll tell you this much. I've never been big on Maurice Hooker's defensive prowess. I've never been big on it. But I'm even less of a fan of Alex Saucedo's defensive prowess. If you gotta look at both of these guys, you can make an argument that Maurice Hooker is slightly more defensible than Alex Saucedo, in spite of the fact that both of them give up their height at times to mix it up on the inside. That's saying to the layman that neither one of these guys is defensively blessed. Neither one of these guys is their Pernell Whitaker. You understand? Neither one of them. But one of them is a little better defensively than the other, and that's Maurice. Maurice is slightly more defensible than Alex Saucedo. Now, what you can say about both of these guys is they're both tough customers. They're both gutting, gritty kinds of fighters. They're both guys who have a tendency to mix it up on the inside and fight in a phone booth in spite of how tall they are. So it could be a closely fought contest. It could, because both of these guys do have defensive lapses in judgment at times. But what I will say is it being that Maurice is slightly better defensively, and I do feel that defense is going to be a determining factor in this fight, I do lean a bit towards Maurice. I realize that this is going to take place in Alex Saucedo's backyard. But lest we forget, Maurice Hooker traveled to Terry Flanagan's backyard and won a close decision. So you want to be mindful of that as well.
He's done it before.
Maurice Hooker's not a stranger to going to another guy's backyard and getting the job done. Now, the reason that I feel that defense is going to be an important factor in this fight, particular to this fight, is because the judges are going to be watching this fight and they're going to see that one guy is getting hit with some really big shots, really hard shots, you know? There's going to be one guy that's getting hit with some significant telling blows, and whoever's not getting hit with those kinds of punches is likely who's going to get the decision. I do feel that this thing could go to a decision. The reason I say a decision is because Maurice Hooker doesn't give himself enough spacing to really generate power. When you're a long, slinky fighter like Maurice Hooker, you know, you really generate your power from getting full extension off of the punches, whereas Maurice Hooker, we know he gives up his height and he likes to fight in a phone booth, and that kind of takes something away from his power. He's not generating as much power as he could be if he had a little bit more control over the distance at which the fight is being fought. So I'm not really seeing a knockout per se, but you know, I think it's possible Maurice could win on the cards. I just wish Maurice Hooker would give himself a little bit more space at times. Give himself a little bit more space to thereby generate a little bit more power. He would be optimizing his height and his reach advantages over smaller fighters if he did this, you know, because if he's going to get right in there with the guy in a crawl space, you're kind of smothering your own punches. You're not giving yourself the chance to really generate power. You know, that could be a determining factor in a situation like this when you know that the guy you're about to fight, he wants to fight you mid-range to inside. Whereas if Maurice exhibited a bit more control over the distance at which a fight is being fought, he could play target practice all night with a guy like this. You know, so we'll see if there are improvements when it comes to Maurice Hooker's repertoire. I do lean towards Maurice Hooker a bit. I think that Maurice Hooker shows slightly better boxing than Alex Saucedo. And even though he really hasn't wowed me yet with a performance, he does seem like the slightly more defensible fighter. So look out for this in November. And in other news, reports are coming in that Eddie Hearn has met up with Alexander Krasiuk, who works for K2 Promotions, which promotes Alexander Usyk, to negotiate the fight between undisputed champion Alexander Usyk and former WBC champion Tony Bellew. And I think the fight gets made with little difficulties. I think that these guys have a good working relationship. I think the fight will get done. And I just want to add that, I think this could be a little bit more competitive than the Garcia fight. I don't think it's going to be as one-sided
as the Garcia fight was.
The reason for this is, Tony is arguably a more skillful fighter than Garcia. He's not as good a physical specimen, I'll say that much. I don't think he's got a chin like Garcia, and I don't think he packs a punch like Garcia. Tony packs a punch, but it's not the same kind of concussive punch that Garcia has. In terms of physicality, Garcia is a more sturdy guy than Tony, but in terms of technique, Tony is actually superior. Tony has mobility, in and out capabilities. Tony can fight you on the outside, and he can fight you on the inside. So the overall aesthetic of the fight is going to be different than what we just saw with Usyk and Garcia. It may not look like that at all because, Usyk and Garcia, that's a fight where Garcia's got to get to his sweet spot to do anything, and Usyk is effectively keeping him out of that sweet spot. But the same doesn't apply for Tony Bellew, where Garcia has to get mid-range to inside to start doing things. Tony doesn't have to. Tony's got some good reach, some good height, some good mobility, so he doesn't have to get there to start doing things and throwing punches, being effective. So the aesthetic of the fight is going to be different. Then you factor in that Tony is a lot more mobile than Garcia. One drawback that Garcia has is that he's not that fleet of foot. He's not light on his feet. Tony actually is. Tony knows how to move around that ring, knows how to navigate around it, use it to his advantage. So the aesthetic of a fight between Tony and Alexander is going to be different from what we just saw, and it might even be more competitive. I'll tell you that I favor Usyk to win the fight. I think it's a fight he can and will win. But I feel like Tony's going to make it interesting for us. I think that Tony is going to go for the gusto. You got to realize that Tony Bellew is a game fighter. You got a lot of guys out there that really don't want to square off against the best in their division, the best in their weight class. There are guys that actively circumvent and try to avoid the best fighters in their division, whereas Tony, he's willing to come right at him. I applaud him for that. And that gamesmanship could make for a more interesting fight and a fight that isn't as one-sided as the Garcia fight was. So I look forward to that. I think maybe they're trying to get it done for the end of this year. I look forward to that. But, all jokes aside, I do think Usyk's going to win the fight, but I think it's going to be an entertaining fight, and it won't be as one-sided. And Amanda Serrano posted this via her Instagram, and we know who she's going to be fighting for that vacant WBO title at 140 pounds. She's going to be facing Argentinian Yamila Reynoso. And I'll tell you, I don't give Yamila very good odds to win this fight. The only thing of note that Yamila Reynoso has really done was lose to Erika Farias, the WBC champion in that same division, and Chris Namis, the IBF champion in the junior middleweight division. Aside from losing to those two, Yamila Reynoso has really done nothing of note, so I don't give her very good odds to win this fight. All things considered, the logical choice in this situation would be Amanda Serrano. I think she will become the WBO champion at this weight, but I'm going to say this. I've already talked about how I feel in regards to Amanda dividing her time between two sports. I feel that it's ill-advised. I feel that you're not quite giving 100% to either sport when you're dividing your time between them, because both sports are worlds apart. Amanda's dabbling in mixed martial arts, and she's simultaneously continuing her boxing career. And while I feel that she's still got what it takes to beat somebody like Yamila Reynoso, what if it were Erika Farias, who is a far more seasoned opponent, who's fought some real fucking people, who could pose some real fucking challenges? You see what I'm saying? I think Amanda can beat somebody like Yamila and become a champion. It's kind of an opportunistic situation. But if it were someone else, I feel that it would be more challenging, especially when you're dividing your time between two sports that are very different. Are you really giving either one 100%, or are you giving each one 50%? Because you really are dividing your attention. You see what I'm getting at? So I'm confident that Amanda Serrano wins this fight. But I would prefer to see her stay in the boxing ring. Or, you know what, if you're going to be an MMA fighter, then focused on MMA. I would rather see her dedicate all her time to one and see how good she can do than dividing her time between them, because a part of me feels that that's ill-advised, and I don't know, it doesn't really seem like a good idea. Call me crazy. In any event, keep your eyes peeled for this on September 8th at the Barclays Center, where I think Amanda Serrano will become a 6th division champion. She will become the WBO champion of the 140-pound division. And lastly, there seems to be a bit of drama going on between WBA regular middleweight champion Ryota Murata, Top Rank, and the WBA. Thing is, WBA mandated that Ryota Murata face Rob Brandt in a mandatory title defense of that baby belt that he's holding.
Okay.
But Ryota Murata and Top Rank and Taken Promotions, because he's co-promoted by Top Rank and Taken. Long story short, they're resisting this mandate, and they want to go ahead and face Jason Quigley on October 20th at the Mandalay Bay. Top Rank is alleging that the WBA's mandate contradicts itself, that they're contradicting their own rules. So they're going to resist the mandate, not fight Rob Brandt, and just as well, they're going to resist the WBA attempting to strip Murata for not fighting Rob Brandt. It's a very hairy situation, and all the details really haven't been divulged, but I'll tell you this much. The WBA contradicting themselves, it doesn't really seem far-fetched, because they contradicted themselves right in front of all of us when they said that they were going to try to consolidate all of these titles to one per division, only to have more of these titles in rotation. I mean, look at the cruiserweight division. You've got Alexander Usyk holding one version of the belt, but you've also got Beibut Shumanov holding another version of the belt, and then there's this other French guy holding yet another version of the belt. So when Top Rank says that the WBA is contradicting themselves, it's not outside the realm of possibility. It's possible, because they've done it before. Now, I think that this can be misleading if you aren't familiar with the fighters. I think that you may hear this story and think that, is Ryota Murata trying to get out of a fight with Rob Brandt? Let me tell you something. If they're trying to get out of this fight, I don't think it's because of how fearsome an opponent Rob Brandt is. If you've seen Rob Brandt, then you'll know that. And if you've seen Ryota Murata, then you'd probably give him very good odds to beat Rob Brandt, who's been floating around the middleweight division for a while, but hasn't done anything there. He then decided to go up to 168 for the World Boxing Super Series, and he was handled by a very aged Jürgen Brammer, okay? So Rob Brandt doesn't really seem to me
to be any kind of a threat.
Like a guy that Ryota Murata has to duck. I don't really think that's what's going on here. I think that they have a plan for Ryota Murata. They may want to allow him to make his U.S. debut against Jason Quigley, and, Rob Brandt's just not part of those plans. Because I'm going to tell you the truth, I don't see anything in Rob Brandt that poses a threat to Ryota Murata. I don't. If they were going to fight, I'd give Ryota Murata good odds to win that fight. Ryota Murata is a very good textbook boxer. He's got a great right hand and some very respectable power. My only complaint with Ryota Murata is he's a little bit too robotic, needs to let his hands go more, that he could use with a little bit more activity, because he's got the kind of power to really hurt a guy. That's my only complaint. But that aside, I'd give him very good odds to beat Rob Brandt. So I don't know that this is a duck. If you guys want to call it that, go ahead. But I've seen them both fight, and I'm going to tell you, I don't see anything in Rob Brandt for Ryota Murata to worry about. What I think is going on here is that, Top Rank and Taken, they already have a plan in play for Ryota Murata, and they're not going to let the WBA get in the way of that. So hypothetically speaking, if the WBA were to strip Ryota Murata of that baby belt, the question then becomes, what is he really losing? When we all know the recognized champion, the recognized by everyone, the widely recognized champion at middleweight via the WBA is Gennady Golovkin. So being stripped of that baby belt, I don't even think that... I don't think that makes the least bit of difference for Ryota Murata, who's building his profile, building his resume anyway. More importantly, he already has a very, very loyal following in his own backyard of Japan. This guy's huge. He did great viewership numbers for fighting Emmanuel Blandamura, a guy who has no profile, okay? This guy had how many millions of people watching that fight in Japan? So, losing that baby belt, I don't think that's going to make the least bit of difference to Ryota Murata if that's what happens, if that's what it comes down to. All things considered, this seems to be a guy that's on his way, with or without the WBA. And that rhymed.